Hello, Joe.
Hi.
Nice to see your face on the internet.
Yes, we're all lacking real life interaction, aren't
I
we?
know, I know, it's a crazy one. I saw the government released a new mental health strategy online, like three different platforms today. And
Whoa.
yeah, which is great. Like, it's great they're putting that help out there. But I also am like, oh man, we need less digital interaction and more human interaction.
I know it's really interesting because the school one, the education platform, is coming out on TV tomorrow.
Mm.
And it's really strange to think about putting your kids in front of a screen for so long, given all the rhetoric prior to that has been don't
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
screens.
I know, I know. It's actually quite fascinating. Everyone's like, but no, it's fine. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it will go. Yeah.
it's anyway. Just
Yeah.
quickly, you are Joe Robinson. You're a relationship
Robertson.
counselor.
Richie.
Robertson, yes,
Robertson.
yes, Robertson. Uh, you're a relationship counselor. You are the lead researcher at the Light Project, and what else are you? A therapist?
I am a therapist. I teach antenatal classes.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because I have worked in sexual health for like 15 years. And so that obviously has a maternal health bent. And so that's part of my, I don't know what you would all call it, a skill set, I guess. One of
Ex-
the
your
parts of
expertise.
my life. Yeah, so myself and another midwife, we teach antenatal classes and I do all the relationship stuff and the mental health side of preparing to have kids and how to prepare your relationship. Yeah. So
Wow.
another,
It's a very broad I know you've got a lot of pieces that make up the jigsaw puzzle of you.
yes, that's true. I guess if you think about it as sexual and reproductive health, that's like a massive overarching um, principle. There's lots of goals in that. There's lots of things we need to look after. And so I just kind of tap into different parts of sexual and reproductive health.
That's cool. That's interesting. We've got lots to unpack because you and I met, I guess, through a professional shared interest in deconstructing pornography and its consumption and the impact that has on our young people, huh? Is
Yes.
that how we came into contact? I'm trying to figure it out.
No,
Trying to
I
trace
don't know,
some.
but it was a very, very long cup of coffee. Actually, I don't think you drank anything. I think you just kept buying me orange juices. That's my memory of it because we just had so much to talk about around porn, particularly masculinity. We talked about sexual violence. There's so much ground to cover there.
I know. All right. Well, let's try and recap that for anyone who's taking the time out of their day to watch this.
And I'm on tea, not on orange juice.
You're on tea. Well, I'm on. I have coffee, homemade, obviously, and I have this delicious sparkling water from Vista.
Whoa,
Yeah, zero sugar,
doubling
naturally
down.
flavored. So why sexual and reproductive health? Why pornography? Why did you want to become a sexologist? What led you down such, I guess, a particular niche?
Yeah, it's so weird. I I basically my whole life, I can right from almost my first memory was really interested in bodies, really interested in how they worked, biology, and then fascinated by sexuality. Once I started talking about that, in my, I guess when I was about 10, started to become aware of sexuality and people's sexual practices and how people talked about sex and all that stuff. And it was like a pull. Like it was an uncontrollable kind of pull to try and understand these issues and want to help people. I remember at high school, you know, friends having sex, casual sex, not probably healthy sex, sometimes getting pregnant, dealing with, making decisions about terminations. Like there was so much stuff happening, and I just wanted to jump right into all of it. And
What
then
was
I say that again.
what was your own sex education like? Were your parents particularly prudish, or were they really good about it and sit you down with like, you know, books and diagrams? Like,
I don't remember any books and diagrams, and I don't even remember any sitting down conversations, but they were great. So
yeah.
they, um, I would say they had a really healthy view of sex. They only talked about sex in positive terms. They probably made like a lot of references to their own sex life, and that was maybe weird for other people, but never weird for me because I was always so fascinated about it in general. And I loved that. I loved that they were still having sex. I loved that it was a really positive thing in their life. It was totally healthy and fine growing up, but I don't remember any like sit down weird conversations.
Right.
I do remember once Mum must have found out about relationships I was having, and then she asked me about what was happening physically in those. And that was very awkward. I do remember that. But she was never judgy. She was like, do you feel safe? She never said not to do anything, basically. She just wanted to make sure I was really okay all the time, and they were really, really healthy.
And that seems to have been, I guess, transmitted into the work you do, huh? You're not. I don't think you're particularly didactic in telling people how to live or telling people what's right and wrong, but you're offering them education which they can then make their own choices around. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. So that was modeled to me right from the beginning, was that we provide great information. That's what I felt my parents did, that they provided great information. I had other adults in my life that I could talk to, other safe people, and they probably encouraged those other adult relationships in case I didn't want to talk to them. And then they were really encouraging of my making my own choices. And so I pull from all of that and try and implement it now. I went to a Catholic girls' school, so there was like no sex education. I think we had one talk about relationships, and then a couple of lessons in science about basic biology, and that was it. Like, that was the end. And all the messages were fine. Like, there was nothing anyone said that I really disagreed with or whatever. I didn't feel like there was heaps of judgment coming from the front. But what I did see was the serious void or gap of information led to so many unhealthy sexual practices, I think. Yeah.
Which I would argue endures today. Like, as you know, you and I have done some work together, and we both speak in schools and tour around and talk with young people. And it's such a haphazard, approach to sex education. Like the guidelines that the Ministry of Education provides here is actually quite great, I think.
Yeah.
But schools get to choose what they include in their curriculum or not, and quite often they choose to be, how it was 20 years ago. Here's how to put a condom on. Don't get pregnant.
Well, we didn't get that. I mean, there was definitely no
Catholic girls' school, yeah.
Or none of that. I don't think they would have ever talked about condoms. That was like not a thing. But I mean, I feel for schools. Like, I'm not into the blame game, so. Sure. I think a lot of the time, a lot of the time teachers are really trying to do their best.
Yeah.
And we expect a lot from them. So we expect them to just be really comfortable talking about sex, talking about porn, understanding mental health, being able to recognize, problems in kids and intervening quickly. I just expect them to be really comfortable and really good at having all of those conversations when they probably spent all of 2 weeks talking about those things for a 3-year degree. Or they trained to be in health education, like in PE.
Yeah.
Basically. And then there's like the side health bit. And so I just feel bad for them. I feel like the world expects so much from them, and they're probably not equipped. I mean, a lot of people come out of teachers training college when they're 21.
Yes. Well, I went to teachers training college when I was 20 to 21. And even then I was like, oh, wow. Like I was surprised at just lack of general, I mean, not that I was an expert in anything and continue not to be, but I remember being taken aback about people who are much older than me, like retraining or whatever, and their lack of general knowledge about, I don't know, the political system or a whole bunch of stuff that I thought would be fundamental if you're going to be a teacher. Which isn't a critique. I mean, it is a critique, but I'm not trying to be mean. I don't know how to say that and not sound like a dick. Do you know what I mean, though? Like,
totally. But I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the tertiary sector now, as a student. And what I understand is that there is only so much time.
Yeah.
And it sounds really bad, but it can be really hard to fit in all the content that all the people want to learn in that amount of time.
Yes.
And I think it's just hard work. So I guess I have empathy for all the players in that game.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to be. Empathy with everything, I think, is always going to stand us in good stead as a society, as an individual and as a society.
And then the other side is the schools are trying to factor in what their community wants. And communities are not homogenous, like we're not all the same. And your community will be different from my community. And, I grew up in South Auckland for a period of time, and Dave and I, my husband, have, lived out south for nearly 10 years. And not anymore, but we did. And it's a really conservative culture in the parts that we were in. And they're trying to factor that in, and they don't want to piss off all their parents, and they don't want all their parents to be upset. And I'm, as a parent now, I'm like, yeah, tell me what you're going to teach my kids. Like, I want to be involved in that process. So also, just to make this kind of blanket, all schools have to teach the exact same thing, and all schools have to do it in this way. We leave the parents out of the conversation.
I know, but I struggle with that because then we've got such mixed messages about such important ideas about like consent and stopping sexual violence and what is a healthy relationship. And as you and I both know, like through our work, like what fills the gap, particularly with sex education, is pornography, which in fact exacerbates a lot of the issues the research tells us that we're trying to minimize the harm of, right? And so that's where I'm like, we need to put perhaps we need to put parents. It's hard to say. Like, how do we put parents feelings aside and be like, well, this is what the best evidence tells us is the best way to help your kids navigate such an important part of their life, sex and sexuality and healthy relationships. Does that sound like draconian? I don't know.
No, I think that a really good step that was taken was to make it an opt-out system rather than an opt-in.
Yeah, that's nice.
That was really good. I think that really helped. I guess I just don't think it's really simple. And
it's not,
it's super complex, and you're trying to think about the kids, the teachers, the school system, and the parents. And you're just trying to make sense of that all. And some people do it really well, and some people really struggle. And I'm like, it's really hard. It's gritty.
It's gritty. Size. What do you think schools can do better? schools can do better.
Depressing.
It's not depressing. It's not depressing. Like, it's interesting. Well, so, but it's heavy, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't spend a lot of. It's not until my friends' kids start turning 11, 12, or 13 that they get in touch and like, Billy was looking at like the 2020 version of Debbie Does Dallas. Like, got any advice?
Yes, and that's a shame because then they're playing catch up, aren't they?
Yeah, because my 6-year-old stepson is already interested. He's talked about having crushes on girls. He's really interested in like genitalia and body parts, and I understand that to be a normal part of human development. Sometimes I want to pick up the phone and be like, "Yo, Joe, he said this. Is this right? Is this too early?" Like,
I get a lot of that.
Do you really?
A lot.
What is the normal? Is there a normal, or what is the standard typical age that kids have a curiosity in sex and sexual relationships? You said 10 in your own life. Like,
it's so not a normal, and I think that some kids have a vent, earlier than others. I definitely had my first crushes when I was 5.
Really?
Yeah, 100%. I remember it all so clearly. There was this guy called Harry, and I remember I really liked Harry. We lived in Australia at the time, and I remember this other girl called Emily, and they kind of hung out a lot together or whatever. And I actually thought I need to take Emily down.
We're what, with a fist fight? Like, what are you talking about here?
It was real to me. I could see her power, and I needed to shut that down.
Wow.
And I needed to be in Harry's mind. And that was early primary.
And did that work out? Did you get to like hold hands with Harry?
We never held hands, but I feel I did win that.
That's awesome.
But then Dave, like my husband, not interested at all. Like, no, nothing. Didn't think about girls in primary, didn't really even think about them in high school because he just played a lot of sport. And he was like, girls will just bring me down. So he was like,
really?
nah, I'm too busy.
So even, yeah, right. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Because there's this big cultural conversation that all guys want all sex all the time. But it's interesting your husband, like, from a young age, stepped outside that paradigm.
Sport was his number one.
Right.
It was his first love. And then I was his second. It's like pretty much it was just not on his radar.
Wow, that's fascinating. I went to an all-boys school, and it was all the toxic conversation. Well, I don't really like the word toxic, but those toxic conversations that we talk about a lot, right? Like it was a lot of like bragging about the girl that you hooked up with at the party on the weekend and how many girls have you had sex with, and it was like this dominant thing that was always in the background of just existing at an all-boys high school.
Yeah,
and I think that really permeated into my early conceptions of what I needed to be like to be an acceptable man, which was to have a lot of sexual partners and be sexually promiscuous. And I guess I've kind of
say he went to an all-boys school as well, and he would say that was really present, that those conversations were really present. He felt like they were there. He felt that there probably was some pressure, but he had a couple of really solid friends who all were really passionate about their sport, and he was into sailing and windsurfing and the whole, like there was a whole particular passion there. And so that's what occupied him.
Wow.
And so all the rest kind of became background noise. Present, but background.
Clean cut Dave.
Really clean cut.
Yeah, I had to make a whole lot of mistakes. Perhaps not mistakes. I had to take a whole lot of learning experiences, which I guess were emotionally, I don't know, formative in some way. I've done this thing in the last like 5 or 6 years since I've been working in this space to like talk to old girlfriends. I don't know if I've told you about this.
Yes.
Yeah, and be like, oh, hey, sorry about that time that we like slept together and I never called you back, or like this was how I was at that stage of my life, and if there's anything you want to talk about. And it's actually been really cool. Like everyone's greeted it with like a positive reception. But it's interesting thinking about how the same problems are happening for our youth today. Like kids are getting all these really negative, well, I would argue negative ideas about sex and relationships, and they play out in real terms. And then in 10, 15, 20 years later, are they going to have to unpack that, like, which is why I wish there was some sort of like massive paradigm shift in the way that we talk about sex and have these like really hands-on, pragmatic, instructional lessons readily available for all kids, not depending on the school they go to.
Probably not hands-on.
Okay. Well, you know what? Wrong turn of phrase. Shit. Yeah.
Not hands-on, Richie. We don't want a hands-on lesson.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out on YouTube. I appreciate that. But you know what I mean. Like
totally. Yes. I would have loved that. I definitely would have loved that. I would have been really, really happy with some more instructional, helpful, practical advice. I would have benefited from that and really enjoyed it. I'm sad that didn't exist for myself and my peers.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So that there was a loss there. You hold that intention with there's not just the teenager essentially there's the parents, there's the culture, there's the values of their community, there's just other factors playing in, there's the teacher and their experience level, what messages they're going to communicate. So you constantly holding those two next to each other. So
you and I met, I guess, through research around pornography and an interest in education around pornography, and you did a brilliant TED talk on the importance of parents who talk to their kids about porn. Why do you think porn is such an important topic in this day and age?
Yeah, it's fascinating for me because I never saw porn. So it was not part of my upbringing at all. Catholic girls' school, never, never. Nobody talked about it. It was never there. And I never had boyfriends talk about it, nothing. But then when I went to university, I started to understand in the halls that this was a thing and that guys only, that's what the only rhetoric that I heard was that guys were watching porn and that they weren't necessarily loving what they were watching. It was actually quite a lot of negative messaging from them, like that they wanted to watch less or they didn't think it was that great, but they still did it. And then when I went into the research, just realizing how many young people or young adults use porn as a sex educator was just terrifying for me. And then I thought, okay, well, what is it? You know, if that's the educator, what's the content? And you know this, but the content is really rough, like literally rough, and really, really sexist and racist. And I'm just so sad that that is the education that they're getting. Yeah,
So,
I really come as well from the parent of 3 boys, and I just am desperate for the education to look different.
mm. For the people who aren't familiar with these conversations, which actually not many people are, because who
Yes.
researches pornography? Apart, I mean, like actually research pornography, not people who like masturbate to Pornhub. How can pornography be racist? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's good because you're right that not everyone is. I can easily just say things and then realize that no, that's not kind of standard knowledge.
It's not standard knowledge at
No.
all.
So essentially, it plays on racial stereotypes. So if you've got, speaking from American language, if you've got an Asian, a Latino, or a black man, they are much in the porn scene. They are much more likely to be aggressive. Black men are 4 times more aggressive to white women than they are actually to black women. And so they play this kind of predatory role. If there is an Asian man present in the scene, 50% of the scenes will include a non-consensual act.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
That's
every second scene that has an Asian man in it has non-consensual behavior. So the extreme racially charged ideas that gives across to a viewer in a very subtle kind of incognito way, that the way that changes our brains and the way that we view other people is very powerful and very problematic.
so what you're saying is that the research tells us that we're conditioning ourselves to believe racist stereotypes that Asian men or African American men are more likely to be sexually predatory. Is that in
Yeah,
plain English what you say?
yeah.
And how does that work for people? Is there like a neurological reward system going on there? Like, break that down.
Oh, I mean, I haven't really gone deep into the brain research.
Chemistry, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gone too far into that. What we have worked really hard on as an organization and personally as a therapist is trying to understand what the personal sexual relationship impact is.
Sure.
But essentially, yes, when you experience orgasm or climax from watching a particular thing, you are rewarded for watching that particular thing. Like
Sure.
that's a buzz. And you are also how do you frame it? You learn faster through visual stimuli than you do from like written content.
Okay.
And so you are more likely to learn those messages there than you are from if you read a book about anti-racist, commentary.
Right.
What's the loudest voice? And usually the loudest voice is the visual stimuli that you're constantly feeding into yourself.
And that's the same in regards to the fact that we could argue, well, not even argue, but the research that you're developing and exploring and sharing is the same with sexist behavior and sexist attitudes, huh?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I think so. What's been really interesting about this whole conversation is that for, I don't know, however many decades, most of society and media have bought into this concept of social learning theory. So they've said, hey, what we put out in society, the messages we put out in our society, people learn from those. So what we put in our ads, what we put in our TVs, what movies we watch, what games we play, all of that stuff impacts us. And that's why we've seen so many changes around things like smoking, for example. So, and mental health. So social learning theory means that we put more billboards out there, we put more ads out there, we put more TV shows out there that have positive messaging around mental health, or they have negative messaging around problematic behaviors like smoking. But for some reason, people who buy into that theory on all those other issues still don't buy into it on porn. But you can't separate them. You can't say, oh, social learning theory applies on, body image, and therefore we should change the body representation that are in all our ads. And then, social learning theory does not apply to porn. You can't do that.
But people do. This is interesting. This is not, I didn't plan on talking about this, but so what you're pushing back against is a very liberal conception of pornography and its impact on society. Because it strikes me that like...
you can't just be like, I believe it on all these other issues, but I just don't believe it on this one.
Why do you think people say that? Why do you think people argue that porn is harmless and that it's a positive liberal pursuit and that we shouldn't stifle it?
I think people are really afraid to come across as what has now been framed as like sex negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think that saying porn could be a problem is the same as saying sex is bad.
Mm.
None of those words are the same. So they're just not the same. But there's so much fear around coming across as moralistic or judgmental, and therefore people don't want to do it. And I think that's a big assumption. That's if someone is what I call porn critical, that they are also sex negative. They just don't necessarily go together. I mean, I think someone who's porn critical could equally be someone who is really passionate about epic sex. I mean, that would make sense. Like you would put those two together. So I think there's a lot of fear around how you will come across if you're seen as criticizing porn.
Because I remember the film People vs. Larry Flint. Do you remember that?
No.
It was a Woody Harrelson film, but Larry Flint was the guy behind Hustler magazine and his porn empire. And they really painted it as he was like this shining light of free speech and human decency. But as I moved into the literature, I was like, oh, he's like essentially like a pro-rape advocate. If you look at, the cartoons that they used to publish about joking about molestation and sexual violence and really negative tropes about, male-female relations. Mm. Do you think there's still a hangover there that people think that people like Hugh Hefner were the great liberators and did us all a huge favor, and that if you're against that you're somehow like the Christian moral right?
Crazy fundamentalist.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I try and take a strengths-based approach.
Yes, please do.
And if I try and, take a positive, assume the best of people approach, then I would say there are some people who create porn who really do want to do that, and they really do want to educate people about their bodies and educate people about great sex, and they really that is their intention. Is that what happens when the viewer watches it? Not sure all the time. But also you have to separate out types of porn. So you have to separate out mainstream from niche. Yeah. So if you collapse those two together, it's impossible to have a conversation about healthy porn, because there are some people who are trying to do a liberating thing and their intentions are really, really good in doing that. It hasn't been really well assessed, so I'm not going to be like jump on the bandwagon. Feminist ethical porn is just like awesome. I think that would be too big of an assumption at this point, given how little research there is there. But I know the intentions there are different, and so I won't collapse them in together.
Right. But in the public discourse, that's an easy thing to do, because everyone's like, but what about feminist ethical porn?
Yeah.
When in fact, what we're generally talking about is what most young people consume, which is the
Yeah.
mainstream pornography they find on RedTube and Pornhub and all those different free, easily accessible sites.
And it silences the conversation. So if you say, oh, there are these problems with porn, and then someone goes, oh, but what about ethical porn? It's like it doesn't leave you any room to then go back to that first conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's essentially saying, oh, here's a solution, I'll just slap it on and the whole thing will go away. And I don't think it really works like that, because it's always paid content. Because part of making it ethical or feminist is that you pay the
Performer.
well, you pay the, directors well. So it's always paid content. You really have to find it. So you have to do kind of quite a deeper dive to get there. So it's not like, oh yeah, there's this option and great, everybody can just do that now.
Yeah, because a teenage boy is not going to like pull out his credit card and pay for something that's more ethical, right? They're going to like, what? Yeah.
Or go onto a website which then tells you what the 10 most ethical sites are, because all the other ones just say ethical but aren't actually. So,
yeah, sure.
I think you actually said this once in a presentation, which I thought was great, was that there's no fair trade stamp.
Oh,
So
thank you.
there's no certification process.
Yeah.
And there's been, I would say, 2 pieces of research on ethical, feminist, and female-directed porn. And what came back was that, yeah, they did have lower rates of some of the things we're worried about, like sexist content, racist content, non-consensual behavior, non-incestual themes. But those things were also all still present.
Yo, that's a mental one. I don't know if I'm allowed to use the word mental. Sorry, anyone who's offended by that. That is a really interesting one you bring up, is the whole growth of incest themes in mainstream pornography. Like the front page of most, tube sites are stepfather, stepdaughter relationships, or stepsister, stepbrother relationships, which in a country like Aotearoa, New Zealand, which actually has really high rates of sexual abuse, I'm like, how are so many people getting their sexual gratification from that? How did that come about?
Well, one of the theories is that basically porn always has to push past current general media. So whatever general mainstream media is doing, then porn always has to push that taboo a little bit further in order to make it novel and exciting and interesting. So if you've got shows like Game of Thrones already having incestual content, then what porn does is just push it out a bit more.
Right. To get a viewer stimulated.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, what would that even look like? What does that mean? And the other thing is that people are actually pulling back. This is positive. So here's a positive thing.
I love positive.
Yeah. People seem to be wanting to pull back from the rough content.
Sure.
So the New Zealand research of young people showed that young people didn't actually want to see as much slap hit around stuff. They didn't really want it. And what people are going back to is essentially a narrative style of porn. So less rough, got a little bit of a storyline.
Right. Pizza delivery guy turns up, makes a bit of a joke.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is exactly what incestual porn is. It's actually less slap around, rough, but it's got a narrative.
Yeah, but that's a really illegal narrative. Like which normalizes, incest and
Well, it definitely normalizes it, but eroticizes it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's a double there.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really heavy. What's the solution to that? Do you believe in censorship? Do you believe in banning? I'm seeing like this big, not big, but I'm seeing like a petition online. I think it's led by like Collective Shout or someone to get Pornhub taken down because there's so much trafficking content on it. Do you believe in something like that being an effective tool? Because I would argue censorship doesn't work. You ban something, it's just going to pop up everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you would do that given they don't create their own content.
Yeah.
So they're not content creators, they're like distributors. So
yeah.
I don't even know how they would have legal responsibility for that. One of the things that has been talked about by the OFLC, the Office of Film and Lit Classification, is, which is such a long term, they really condense that down. But one of the things that has been talked about is if you essentially shrink the pool of distributors, then I have no idea how this would work, but if you shrunk the pool of distributors, so you shrunk the pool of tube sites and porn sites, then you would have a better way to manage those relationships. Does that make sense?
Yep,
So
yep.
if you were stricter on your filtering of
Yes.
what websites came into the country or not, again, so don't understand how you would do that. But if you had a stricter regime of allowing certain websites in or not, then you would be able to have a much more robust dialogue between your country and 10 sites.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Instead of like all the sites, the millions of sites. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. So the flip side of that, so you cut out all the little guys, basically.
Yeah.
And then you got solid relationships with the big ones. The problem, though, with that, from a flip side, is that you cut out all your niche sites.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So anyone who's trying to do something slightly alternative.
And potentially more ethical.
Potentially more ethical. Emphasis on potentially. So then they're kind of gone too, because they're little.
Yeah, right. And then people who are into, I don't know, feminist lesbian pornography or, yeah, okay, all those more positive potential tropes get shut out, and we're stuck with this arguably nasty mainstream narrative.
You get a monopoly, like you got a full-on monopoly on.
Yeah, sure. There are people watching this who are like, porn's not that big a deal. You know, like, you guys are just nerds, moralistic nerds. But does porn impact, our sexual violence statistics? Like, are we seeing this play out in real human behavior as much as just the consumption of it?
Yes, is the short answer. I absolutely believe that it can have some positive experiences for people.
Okay. What are the positives? And let's go through.
Some positives have been that people who are sexuality or gender diverse, it might be the first time they ever see two men kiss.
Right, okay.
It might be the first time they see a trans person in a relationship with a binary gender person, and someone who is like cis female or whatever. It might be the first time they see those two people coupled together and feel like, whoa, this could be an option for me. So I'm not going to minimize that. I'm not going to take that away and just say, oh, that positivity doesn't exist. I think some people really experience that, and I get it. I understand.
Okay.
But you can't just have that and not see all of the other research that suggests that there are so many issues that are created when people watch frequent and medium to high levels of porn. So one of the research showed that once porn use does actually hit monthly, it does decrease real life sexual satisfaction. So frequent, regular, and like that habitual content, early exposure also is more likely to have a big impact. So the younger you are, the more frequently you watch it, the types of content, those things are more likely to have an impact. So what I say to parents often is they're like, oh my gosh, I just found out my 11-year-old saw blah, blah, blah. I'm like, probably if they've just seen it once, it's probably going to be fine. It's not likely to have a big impact on them. If they started watching porn every second day, then yes, they probably would.
We see a lot of talk about like pornography addiction. Do you think that's a real thing?
Well, from a therapeutic perspective, I have sat with countless people for whom that's their label for it, and they find themselves going back to porn even when they don't want to. It is destroying their relationships. It's destroying their relationships with their kids. It's impacted their work. It's stolen things from them. And I see that regularly enough to say, hey, this is a biggie for people.
Yeah, not all people, but I know we're putting all the caveats in there. I get
Yeah.
it. Because I think with any sort of addiction, it's often, well, my experience working in the alcohol and drug space is often an addiction is symptomatic of either underlying trauma or a broader society that doesn't make us feel really good, that makes our mental health suffer. We feel disconnected and alone and isolated, and we're chasing all these external validators that don't actually fulfill us. And so porn or alcohol or other drugs become something to numb out affect. Is porn used in the same way as?
Yes, but I think it does have some other starters, some other kind of fire starters to the issue. So it also can be born out of boredom,
Sure.
just like plain old boredom
Yeah.
or stress. So if you've just got like medium level stress and you regularly get bored, you can develop a porn habit. So there's not necessarily a big underlying trauma there, or it can be. It also can be you, have some mental health stuff going on for you, and that's how you manage it. That's how you comfort yourself. But it can also be that you've never learned how to manage boredom.
Yeah, right.
So super, super simple. And that's definitely some of the impacts that I see is people who started just, normal, like 14, they saw some porn and then they just were like, this is cool. And then they just kept going with it and it massively impacted their life later on. That's the minority of people, not the majority, but still it started from just like this really kind of benign place.
Yeah, sure.
So it's slightly different in that way. It's also harder in some ways to overcome because with alcohol or drugs, for example, your goal is sobriety often. So your goal is to be sober from the thing that you have been compulsively attached to. With porn, you can't aim for sobriety because you still need to be a healthy sexual person.
Right. Yeah, sure. So you're going to have sex with the real people at some stage.
Yeah. So we can't be like, you need to be sober from sexuality.
Yeah, right.
So it's really maintaining your desires and maintaining your libido and all of that good stuff, but learning how to manage it in a healthy way. And so it's fundamentally kind of different to manage.
I mean, I imagine it's super difficult for someone to retrain their synapses. Like possible due to neuroplasticity, but very difficult.
Super difficult, but I see it happen all the time. So
okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm like just bumming anyone out there. Sorry, guys.
Really, really hopeful. I mean, I definitely see some of the worst effects of this.
Yeah.
I'm like seeing people separate from their partners and get, custody orders against their children. Like I'm like seeing it there.
Really?
Yeah.
How does that compulsive pornography use lead to like separation? Because just the sex life breaks down, or the user of the pornography is just spending so much time online. Like, what is that? How does
Usually, a big part of my work would be around betrayal. So the feeling that someone else is keeping, not even the feeling, but the truth that someone else is keeping a secret from you.
Sure.
So maybe you knew that they watched a bit of porn, but you didn't know that while you were asleep, they were watching it in bed. So, and they were not being sexual with you, that they were seeking it through this platform. So there's a real sense of betrayal there, lack of trust. And then, a lack of attention to your real life partner and their needs. So those would be the two biggies.
Wow, that's really sad. That's super heartbreaking. Is that gendered? Because I know that there's an increasing number of women who are using pornography too, or reporting to in the data. Is there a gendered nature in that habitual use of porn, or?
I don't know in terms of the literature. My own experience is that I've only seen men play out compulsive behaviors in terms of my own therapeutic practice, but I have had conversations like over social media, and I have heard talks from other women who have experienced what they call porn addiction and struggled with that. But I haven't worked with that myself.
Yeah, actually, I did have a woman DM me on Instagram looking for resources about pornography, and she was a self-proclaimed porn addict, and she was sober now. Yeah, that was interesting for me to be like, oh, yo, I've never had that before.
Yeah, there's no reason to think that it would be gendered, in that it wouldn't. There's no reason to think it would only affect men, because both men and women view porn.
Yeah, of course.
Brains, like you just said, are neuroplastic, and they develop pathways. So it would definitely be representative in both. However, because porn consumption is slightly gendered, you would see higher rates of compulsivity amongst males.
Just because men are looking at them. Yeah, sure. It shapes our concepts of masculinity, huh? You and I talked about this at the Orange Juice Consumption Fest. That was our first meeting. And I know we've talked about porn for the bulk of this conversation. I didn't really have a plan on what we're going to talk about. But how does, when we've grown up from boys, like how do all these messages about pornography, or the messages portrayed in pornography, shape our ideas about manhood?
Yeah. To be powerful, to be strong, to be the leader is to be a man.
Yeah, sure. So it's all those tropes of like, you're a stud and you're a legend if you sleep with heaps of girls in a sort of callous fashion, huh?
Yeah. And sex is about you, is for you, she's there to serve you. Yeah, it's really sad. But I think it's really sad for both people. So,
it is sad, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, women are just the victims in this.
No, I think about that too, actually. I think about that too. It's like so many men are desperate for emotional connection and a genuine sensual, whether with a short-term partner or a long-term partner, it doesn't have to be like nasty and using one another. It can just be like a fun, kind, human experience that's respectful. But I think so many men are conditioned, at least in my work experience, so many conditioned to like tap it and gap it, and they're still left feeling empty after that. Is that fair to say?
There's a lot of anger towards men because of that.
Yeah,
men get a really bad rap because of that. But they are victims to their own
socialization.
Right. Yeah. I was at a talk once about porn, and I wasn't doing the presenting, someone else was, and then this woman spoke up, who was in the audience, and she kind of did a little rant about how come boys are like this and how come men do this to women and all this stuff. And I actually just responded also from the audience, and I said, hey, you're just like boys. How are boys to know different? Like,
how did she take that?
Some small person has just entered the room in a wetsuit.
I like it. Stay safe. Stay warm.
There we go. Danny, you want to say hi to the people?
Hey, Danny. What's up, dude? I love your wetsuit.
Can you go say Danny? I, as a mum of 3 boys, that's kind of where I come back to.
Yeah.
If that's what they've been told from day one to, when they're 18, like, how can I blame them for that?
Yeah, I feel the same. I get frustrated by that in particularly online discourse when it comes to like sex and gender theory and feminism. I hate stuff like men are trash and all men this, because I understand the rage and I understand the frustration and the hurt, but at the same time, if you want to be pragmatic and you want to be solutions focused, you can't other the male sex.
No, it's not helpful.
It's not helpful because no one is really born bad. We're socially, like. Do you think?
Now I'm getting more
kids.
There you go. This is real life.
This is real life.
This is real life lockdown life, eh?
Yeah, it is. Hey, it seems like your kids are like run out of patience and they need some mum.
They're like, why have you been so long? Don't you need to see us again? Don't you miss us?
There's so much more that I would love to talk to you about.
We can do a part 2 and a part 3 and part 4.
Yeah, cool. I'm into it. I'm hoping people enjoy this series that I'm starting, and we can continue to do this. I'll probably just do it anyway, even if only 2 people watch it. Yeah. I just like talking to my friends.
I think you've got potential to do the Tiger King vibe, though, like to have a big hit. Did you watch Tiger King?
Oh, I loved it. It
Yes.
was fascinating television.
This can go big like that.
I was fascinated by Tiger King. I was like, what the actual fuck? And then it actually, again, if we're thinking more broadly, it's a fucking tragedy. Like,
Oh, it's devastating, the whole
it's
thing.
the whole thing was so traumatic. Like, we all laughed and there were so many memes and jokes, but every character in that film is a deeply wounded film. So in that series is a deeply wounded person.
Yes.
Deeply wounded.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
It's
thought
very, very sad.
as an animal rights guy, I was
Yeah.
like, oh, the poor animals,
I
this is
know.
heartbreaking.
Same.
But I felt for Tiger King. Like, that dude is a wounded human. And
Yeah,
all his boyfriends and husbands, everyone was wounded in it. It was a big wound fest.
it was a word. Yes.
Hey, Joe, if people want to find you and find your work, where can they check you out?
They can just go to the Light Project website and contact us through that. I don't know if you'll put a link somewhere. I'm not
I
sure.
will. I put a link in the description of this.
Otherwise, they can contact you, and you can.
I'll become your agent. Okay, go. Because you don't have like a big, strong like work public platform on Instagram or social media or Twitter or anything, right?
No, I'm very organic.
I like that. That's cool. It's refreshing.
I don't have any capacity to develop any big thing. I don't have any capacity to have a brand. I just can't do it.
Well,
so I can contact you and you can send them to me.
okay, cool. I will definitely do that. Anyone watching this who would like to work with Jo or like insights into the knowledge that she has, I will connect you. Thank you so much for taking the time away from your family to talk with me today. As a human being, I just want to publicly acknowledge that I think you're amazing and I really appreciate the work that you do and who you are and how you make our society a better place. So thank you.
Thank you. That's
Jo,
very kind.
Jo Robertson. Okay, we'll talk to you again soon, huh?
Okay. See ya.
Bye.